North Korea is now vowing to have a weekly missile launch and preparing for nuclear war at any moment. John McCain is out there doing what he does best, criticizing the president. Here was him this weekend.
I think he's partially right, but I also believe there's a difference between being a candidate and having the guy behind you with the codes. With the codes. The second is, I think that he is growing and he is listening to some very wise and intelligent people. And third of all, I think he was deeply moved at those pictures of those children. Who wasn't? Who wasn't deeply moved by that? But I do believe that we do not have, and I support what he did, and I support the bunker buster bomb, but we've got to develop a strategy. There is still not an overall strategy that he can come to Congress and his advisors and say, okay, this is how we're going to handle Syria. Here's how we're going to handle post-Mosul Iraq. Here's how we've got to have a strategy, and I'll give them some more time, but so far that strategy is not apparent.
All right, so he's saying the president has no strategy. And hey, and Lindsey Graham, it seems that there's not any conflict they don't want the United States in. And Donald Trump, I think, was true to his campaign promises, especially no occupation, no boots on the ground. He doesn't want to get involved in these foreign conflicts if at all possible, although we have ships now moving off the coast of North Korea even as we speak. Joining us now, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, how are you?
I'm doing well, and I think you summarized it pretty well. First of all, the general strategy is pretty clear. Like virtually every rational person, Trump is worried about the North Korean drive to get a combination of nuclear weapons and missiles that could reach the U.S., including, by the way, submarine-launched missiles. At the same time, he wants to minimize risk. He recognizes how dangerous, particularly for the city of Seoul and for 25 million South Koreans in that city, how dangerous North Korea is. And apparently, from everything I can tell, the chemistry between the Chinese president and President Trump was just terrific. And there was a genuine sense of liking each other, talking honestly with each other. Not that solves everything, but as Reagan discovered when he went for a walk in the woods with Gorbachev, sometimes two leaders getting away from all their staffs and chatting, the two of them together, can have a decisive impact. You first saw it when the Chinese abstained from voting on the UN Security Council resolution over Syria, leaving Russia totally isolated by itself. That was a big change from where the Chinese have been. The Chinese have also begun to restrict the amount of coal they're buying from North Korea, and they've moved about 150,000 troops to the North Korean border. So there's some pattern being built here of Chinese-American cooperation, more than I can remember with any president since the North Korean nuclear program became a problem.
Well, I agree. Now, you talked about marrying up intercontinental ballistic missiles with the nuclear weapons they have. I think they have mid-range missiles now, but I think the goal is to keep America at bay by building these ICBMs. And also by building a submarine-launched missile where you could exit the submarine off our coast. Okay, so now we've got a problem and a decision to make here. Under Bill Clinton, every time the North Koreans blackmailed Bill Clinton, he gave in with the promise that they'd never build a nuclear weapon. It never worked. There was no amount of money or concessions that Clinton made to ever stop them. I don't think they're going to stop with their ICBM pursuit either. So the question is, do you allow them to get to that point, or you act preemptively? If you act preemptively, you run the risk that Japan or Seoul or South Korea, they're going to get hit with a nuclear weapon and millions will die.
Right. And that means that first of all, you owe it to the people who are the most immediately at risk to really have in-depth conversation. And there's no accident that the Vice President of the United States has been in South Korea and that they're having serious, direct conversations. And that he said in one of his public statements that Kim Jong-un should not make the mistake of thinking that Donald Trump bluffs. There was a lot to that simple comment, I think. So start there, and then you build out from that, as far as I can tell. You have, I think, you want to get the Chinese to increase the pressure. I suspect that there's an active effort underway. I have no secret information, but I suspect that there's an active effort underway between the Japanese, the South Koreans, and the Chinese to see if there's a way to have a military coup and get rid of this guy and replace him with a military leader who would at least be rational, and you could get to an agreement where you could have the United States and China and Japan and South Korea all agree to sign a treaty that guaranteed that the North would survive in return for the North giving up their nuclear weapons. Now, this guy's not going to do that. I mean, he's totally isolated. He's obviously pretty weird. He just had his half-brother assassinated. 2 months ago, he killed one of his uncles. He recently shot 5 officers with an anti-aircraft gun. This is not your normal, everyday negotiating position. But I suspect that there are efforts underway to increase the pressure and to look for the escape valve of seeing if they could find a way to foment a military coup to replace him.
Well, it would be great, but what does this guy do on the way out the door? Does he go scorched earth and launch everything in his power? I mean, that's also a risk. It does raise a lot of questions here because, your options are limited when you have a madman married to nuclear weapons. And
don't forget, Sean, they've got maybe 100,000 missiles and artillery tubes within reach of Seoul. So even if you don't have any nuclear weapons engaged, the amount of damage they would do,
millions will be dead.
We could take them out would be horrendous, and you can't ask the people of Seoul to run that kind of risk, which could involve literally tens or twenties of thousands of dead people. So
there seems to be a number of realignments happening at once. I mean, in many ways, you can thank Barack Obama by giving the Iranians this ridiculous nuclear deal, but it did bring together Israel, the Saudis, all the Sunni nations, the Jordanians, the Egyptians. And on the other hand, I mean, President Trump was scheduled for a 40-minute meeting with the president of China. It went on 3.5 hours, and that happened twice, not once. And all the things that we discussed happened. So there is a new alignment emerging there.
From the standpoint, it was even worse than that. Remember, when we hit the Syrian airfield, the only countries that objected were North Korea, Iran, Syria, and Russia. I mean, how can Moscow get more isolated than to be down to 2 rogue nations in a country that's propping up?
Well, you see, I mean, at this point, I don't even think the world would have the capability, even with the United Front, even the United States and the Chinese aligning against North Korea. I don't think we'd be able to get out all the nuclear sites anyway. I mean, and this then raises questions about, preemptively striking Iran because, I mean, I'm even more afraid of radical Islamists married to nuclear weapons.
Well, I'm equally afraid just because Kim Jong-un is so
unstable,
totally unpredictable. And by the way, he cooperates with the Iranians. At one time, he cooperated with the Syrians until the Israelis destroyed a reactor the North Koreans had built. He would, I think, cheerfully sell nuclear weapons to terrorists. So I think there's not a whole lot to choose between Iranian religious fanatics and a guy who's a nutcase but has 8 or 10 or 15 nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. But I think that what you're seeing and what Trump is trying to communicate with people like General Mattis and McMaster and others is that we're going to calmly and methodically do whatever it takes, that we will probably next start moving a lot of anti-missile capability in the area. They'll probably also consult with the Israelis about the way they've built the Iron Dome to protect Israel from rockets, although they tend to be shorter range and slower rockets.
Well, I'm headed to Israel later this week. Do you want to come with me?
Well, I'd like to, but I'm doing a few things here. But
do you see this ratcheting up this week? I mean, with the North Koreans vowing a weekly missile launch, although it was pretty entertaining to watch the dud this weekend. Look,
if the truth is, I don't know yet, because again, I don't know any secrets about this, but there are clear indications that we may have used cyber war to make sure that missile self-destructed.
Well, there's all indications that we might have done that.
Yeah. Well, if we're inside his systems and he gets to launch one missile a week that blows up, I could live with that for a long time. You get the Saturday funnies. Let's all get together and watch Kim Jong-un have another missile fail. I mean, that would be okay. I'd probably increase blood pressure. When
we come back, I want to ask you about the domestic policy agenda and the inability of the Republicans in the House to get a health care bill together, which is beyond frustrating. Anyway, joining us now, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. My understanding is the Freedom Caucus, they've been waiting for days for language on the waiver issue, which was the final issue for them, that their votes are going to be available. And where's the lack of urgency why is there a lack of urgency among leadership to get this done? I know for a fact the Freedom Caucus has not stopped working day and night since the day it failed.
Well, look, I don't think there's a lack of urgency, but I also think there's a desire to make sure that if they get this thing packaged right and if they go through the right modifications, that everybody understands it going in, and that they don't end up rushing back here to just fail again. Because this is a little bit like a balloon where you squeeze one end and the other end pops out. I mean, they've got to make sure if they do something that makes the Freedom Caucus happy, does it cost them more moderates than they gain on the
But I understand
side?
the Tuesday group and every other group was consulted as it relates to working out the issues involving the waiver. Here's my frustration. My frustration is after 8 years, they didn't build consensus. Nobody saw the bill. They allowed intramural fighting all over television. They look like the gang that can't shoot straight. And it's beyond frustrating. How are we going to get 2 budgets done this year? How are we going to get health care done this year? How are we going to get the wall funded and ready to be built this year? And, and the tax cuts that were promised by the president, if they can't get their ass moving. I'm very frustrated, if you haven't noticed.
I can tell you're frustrated. All I can tell you is, welcome to the American system. I mean, this is not a parliamentary body.
Okay, but I watched you as Speaker with all due respect, and you got an awful lot done in 100 days. Why can't they?
Yeah, but then it took me 18 months to pass welfare reform. It took us 2.5 years to pass the balanced budget. And I'm just saying, and I'm not trying to apologize for anybody. I'm saying, I know personally, and you know that I've been involved in a lot of this, and I've had calls as recently as this morning, and I've been reaching out to every element of the party. And frankly, remember,
do you think this deal is done? Is Dave Bratt, is he right that this deal should be done by the end of the week?
Well, it may be. I would strongly oppose them coming back to vote this week.
Why?
Because, first of all, they need to make sure that every single member understands what's in this bill before they vote on it. I mean, you read the various reports on town hall meetings where people can't explain the bill.
That is pathetic. I agree.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, having done it for a living one time, it takes time. It takes time. You got to get people in a room.
You annoy me when you're so calm and reasoned and peaceful. What do you call it? Peaceful perseverance? You call. All right, is your old seat in jeopardy because you got a runoff going on there?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. Now, but here's something which is practical and immediate and urgent. Every person listening to us today, and I think I'm going to be with you on TV tonight, and I hope I can repeat this then. Every person should email, call, Facebook, every person they know in the 6th District of Georgia, which is the northern part of the Atlanta area. It's Cobb and North Fulton and Gwinnett. That is Tom Price's seat. It used to be my seat. It was Johnny Isaacson's seat. It should be safe, except we have a Democrat who has spent $12 million. He's become the great liberal hope nationwide. He got the cover of New York Magazine.
He's not getting 50%, though. He's not going to be. He's not getting 50%. There will be a runoff.
Well, no, but remember, I've lived through days when the polls, you did too. Remember the last election where the polls said one thing?
Yeah, that's
true. And the voters said another? I want to make sure, I don't care who you vote for, if you're a Republican, go out and vote tomorrow. If you live in the 6th District, and I want everybody who hears me and understands that I do, in fact, do this for a living, I really care about the Republican majority. Everybody should contact every person they know and make sure they vote tomorrow. As long as enough Republicans vote, he will get probably 40, 41, 42%. When we get to the runoff in June, he will probably get 40, 41, or 42%.
Got it.
And we'll beat him soundly. But tomorrow's the big game, because if we stay home,
then he wins.